Hello, this is Edith Neumeyer, and I'm the author of the book, The Mystery of Adam. I will continue to do my studies, which were kind of started with me reading Josephus and his book, actually the complete works of Josephus. Josephus, of course, was a Jewish historian during the time of Jesus. He wrote the complete history of the Jews. And his book that I was reading, I was not reading the whole thing, but his book, the one that I was reading, is the sixth book, which is the Wars of the Jews. And it is telling us about the wars that the Jews got into before the temple was destroyed, actually before all of Jerusalem was destroyed. And the reason why it was destroyed is because the Jews, a certain group or leaders, they started the war against the Romans, and they tried to kick the Romans out of Jerusalem. And of course, the Romans didn't just leave without any fight, and so of course the Romans did win. And so Jesus predicted that to happen, that especially that the temple would get destroyed. And we see that in Matthew 24 and in Mark 13. And I have already talked about Matthew 24, and I'm going to talk about Mark 13 today. Now, there's another place where this destruction of the temple was actually prophesied, and my last video was about that one. It was about Daniel when he prophesied that this temple again would be destroyed. Now, a lot of people, and I think it may have something to do with the translation as well, but a lot of people, they assume that this Antichrist will set himself into the temple or put an abomination in the temple. And that is all interpretation and really assumptions. As if you watch my video, my second part of this Josephus series, which I call it Josephus series, then you will see that this what they call abomination of desolation is actually the destruction of the temple. And of course, since the Romans destroyed the temple, it was of course an abomination, okay, because they defiled the holy place by just simply being on the temple or in the temple or in the Holy of Holies. They defiled the temple. But Josephus said clearly that the fire and the destruction was actually started by the Jews themselves. They got the Romans so angry that they destroyed everything. Finally, at the final culmination of everything, they just destroyed everything. And I suggest that you listen to the prior videos because they're very important. Matter of fact, I think this is number 4 right now. So I have already done 3 of them. So anyways, watch those first because I don't want to go over all the information. But this Josephus, he was an eyewitness of what happened with the temple and the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem, and what happened before the destruction. It just didn't happen just overnight. So I want to continue with this abomination of desolation, which so many people plays way at the end during the wrath of God. Okay? Yes, People believe that the wrath of God is the tribulation of the saints, or call it the Great Tribulation. But I believe that the tribulation that the saints went through started from the beginning. We see it in the beginning when right from the beginning, before the temple was even destroyed, there was great tribulation for the saints. Okay, they were handed over, into the synagogues to the officials to be tortured and killed. That's just the way it is. Sorry. It's not something that's going to happen sometime when the wrath of God is coming. The wrath of God has to do with the ungodly, not with the godly. The godly people, the believers in Jesus, in Messiah, in Mashiach, those believers, they were persecuted from the beginning. They were persecuted by the Jews, okay, by their own brothers and sisters. They were persecuted from the beginning. So great tribulation, the saints were going through great tribulation from the beginning throughout Christianity, including the Dark Ages, during the time of the Roman Catholic Church, all the way even past the Reformation, depending where you lived, really, you were persecuted. And even today, people are persecuted. So we don't have to talk about that. But this destruction of the temple is what Jesus in Matthew 24 was talking about. Now, in Matthew, he mixes end time stuff with the temple destruction. Whereas in Mark, it seems to be only a destruction of temple, but it says sign of the end as well. So he makes it a little more, but from the beginning, Jesus and the disciples talked about the destruction of the temple. Now let's make this this is very important that we say this. During the time of Paul and the early disciples, okay, or the first disciples, they believed that Jesus would return during their lifetime. So the writers of the Gospels, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, of course John, they believed that Jesus would come back during their lifetime. Okay, Paul as well. And of course they found out that wasn't the case. But they still had that in mind. So when they asked about the destruction of the temple, they kind of put the two events pretty close to each other. Okay, so they really believed the temple was destroyed and the end was in sight, which was not the case. But that's the way they saw it. Okay, so when Jesus makes the statements, they may have had a hard time putting it in correct order, or it may have been also really something that God intended. So we wouldn't be, so unbelievers that are reading this would kind of stay in the dark. That's very important. So if you have the Holy Spirit, or if the right time is here, which we are in the right time, God said to Daniel, the things are sealed, and knowledge will increase. Okay, that means eventually we will understand these things, which we may have not understood in the past. Today we have a lot more knowledge, and knowledge has increased, and so we may be able to understand these things better. So remembering this, let's start with Mark chapter 13. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. Do you see all these great buildings?" replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." This is the statement that we also heard in Matthew. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount Olives, opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen?" See, they go privately because privately Jesus would tell them more information. "And what will be the sign that they are all about to be fulfilled?" Okay, so they wanted to know, when will this happen when there's no stone on top of each other? Tell us, when will these things happen? And he's talking about what? The destruction of the temple. "And what will be the sign that they are all about to be fulfilled?" He said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. Such thing must happen, but the end is still not to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines. These are the beginning of the birth pains." Now, here is a mix, I believe. He's starting out to tell them about when will the temple be destroyed. Okay, so many will come in their name. There's wars, rumors, and wars and rumors of wars, which they went through. Okay, there was wars and rumors of wars. Okay, and do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end still is not to come. And then he's talking about nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Now, is he talking here about the destruction of the temple, or is he already looking at the total end? These are the beginning of the birth pains. You must be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local council and flogged in the synagogues. Has that happened? Yes, that has happened before the temple was destroyed. Okay, so they knew this would happen. "On account of me, you will stand before governors and kings as witnesses to them, and the gospel must first be preached to all nations." Okay, again, is he talking here about the destruction of the temple, or is he now going again to the end? To the last days. "Whenever you are arrested and brought to trial, do not worry beforehand about what to say. Just say whatever is given to you at the time." Again, see, this is all, again, has to do with them being captured. Brother will betray brother, and that probably did happen during that time before the destruction of the temple. Okay, so then we go to verse 14. "When you see the abomination that causes desolation standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." And you know the rest. "Let no one on the housetop go down to enter the house to take anything out. Let no one in the field go back and to get their cloak." And then, of course, how dreadful it is for the pregnant women and nursing mothers. Okay? And then pray that this will not take place in winter, because those will be days of distress, unequal from the beginning when God created the world until now, and never to be equal again. And some believe that this refers to the end time. Okay? The wrath of God. I really believe this may refer to end times, but it also refers to the time before the destruction and during the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, and even after. Okay, it was a horrible time. People were destroyed. Now, when they were going to Babylonian captivity, it wasn't as bad. People were not, the temple was destroyed and killed. People were led into Babylonian captivity. Some stayed behind. The Babylonians did not kill all the people. Okay? Now, the Romans, they killed most of the people. And the people that were strong, they sold into slavery. So not very many people left. Okay, that's why here Jesus said, if you see anything, you better get out. Okay, do not stay behind. And again, I said that before, that I believe the Christians did not um, get killed. I think they all made it out because they saw the signs and they went by the signs and they left. Okay, and here we get this famous quote in verse 20, if the Lord had not cut short these days, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. Who are the elect? Of course, those are the believers, the Christians. Okay? He shortened them for the Christians' sake so they can survive. I don't know why, shortening them would be able to help them survive. But he helped them to survive. See, there was war before the destruction, and I don't know if you remember, but Paul was collecting money for the church in Jerusalem because the people were poor, and that makes now sense because there was a huge famine because this war that the Jews started went on for a long time. It didn't just go overnight. Okay, so there was a famine and people didn't have food, and so the churches, the Gentile churches, were supporting the church in Jerusalem. So God finally then told them, hey, to get out. Okay, so then it says, look, here is the Messiah, or look there, here, do not believe it, for false Messiah and false prophets will appear. And during that time, many false prophets and many false messiahs appeared. I don't remember. There's one that Kapocha or Ben, I don't know. I just know there were several messiahs coming that claimed that they are the Messiah. And of course, they found out they were not the Messiah. Okay, so then in 24 it goes to, but in those days following that distress. Okay, that is important. But in those days following that distress. That was this is huge distress. Now, he jumps over 2,000 years. Okay, because what we see now, but in those days following that distress, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Now, this right now is talking about the end times. Now we're getting a glimpse of the wrath of God coming. Okay? Because we see that in Revelation 6. Okay, in Revelation 6, we actually see that the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. This is now entering into the wrath of God. At that time, people will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory, and he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. Okay, you see, now here is the time when Jesus is back and his return is here. So yeah, people get pretty confused up here because in less than a chapter, okay, he just only continues that the day and the hour nobody knows. And here's talking about the rapture. Okay, but, and that's in 32, but about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. That is that famous phrase that people always bring up too. Now, what is this pointing to? This is pointing to the rapture. Okay, why the rapture? Because, see, in a wedding, during a Jewish wedding, the betrothal happens. So the two people are betrothed, like Mary and Joseph, like Jesus and the bride were betrothed. And then the bridegroom is going to prepare a place for the bride. So he goes to his father's house, prepares a place, and when the father deems it to be ready, then he sends the son back to get the bride. But the bridegroom does not know. Only the father knows. That's that phrase. But about that day or the hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the son, but only the Father. Okay? That is now the rapture. Be on your guard, be alert. You do not know when that time will come. It's like a man going away and he leaves his house and puts his servants, and then you have this parable. Okay? So he's saying, keep watch. Keep watch. So we are going here because this is exactly also what happens in Revelation. In Revelation, it starts out in chapter 6 with the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light and the stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. And at the same time, okay, that's when the rapture happens. Because in chapter 7 in Revelation, we see the people that are sealed, that are going through the wrath of God, and the people that are raptured and are in heaven, that came out of great tribulation. Okay? That came out of great tribulation. The saints came out of great tribulation. And people think, oh, the great tribulation is the wrath of God. No. Great tribulation is the time of the church. The church goes through great tribulation. And then in chapter 8 is where the wrath starts. Okay? At the end of chapter 6, we see that the people are already saying, oh my goodness, the wrath of God is coming. Okay? Even the unbelievers say that. So they know the wrath of God is coming. Okay? And so then the rapture happens during that time as well. So there we go. So of course, then we go back and the reapers are coming, right? It says, at that time people will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory, and he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. Now, this 26 really should be, if you do it chronologically, not before 28, but actually after. Okay, do you see this? That these things are not necessarily chronologically arranged. And that's where we get confused. It's because they're not chronologically arranged. They are arranged randomly in a sense almost. Okay, and not chronological. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about Mark 13 because most people don't bring Mark up. But see, when we read Mark, we can see very clearly that the only thing the disciples addressed was really the destruction of the temple. Okay, well, Jesus addressed it, and then the disciples wanted to know when it happened. But for some reason, this end time stuff was thrown into with the destruction of the temple. So I don't know if Jesus told them in this order, or if they later on just. I think probably not, because Matthew and Mark are kind of doing the same thing. So maybe God's intention was for it to be this kind of confusing, so we actually wouldn't know, and maybe we would even recognize the false teachers and false prophets, because I know because of that I do recognize false teachers and false prophets, because they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, they have absolutely no idea. It makes no sense what they're saying. They mumble jumble everything together, and they have no clear understanding of what the Bible really is talking about. They blabber after other false teachers and never get things right. It seems to me. So again, read Mark 13 and think about that. Okay? Think about the same thing as in Mark and in Matthew 24. That things may not chronological the way they are supposed, well, I can't say they're supposed to be, but they're not chronological. And remember, this is talking about what? It's talking about the destruction of the temple. So when you see this abomination of desolation, well, standing in the holy place, you know it is the destruction of the temple, or what happened during the destruction of the temple. And again, there is no place where Jesus says, oh, it will be destroyed, but it will be at the end, it will be rebuilt. It doesn't say that. Okay? No place, actually no place, does it say that a third temple will be built. Jesus never prophesied it. None of the disciples prophesied it. They knew the temple, especially John. John knew the temple was destroyed. There is nothing in Revelation that would ever say that the third temple was rebuilt. Nothing whatsoever. Now, if you think that was really something important God wanted us to know, you don't think he would have told Paul or John that this will happen? Say, hey, I'm going to have the temple destroyed, but eventually I'll have it. There is something in the Old Testament, of course, that many people quote, and that is in Zechariah, I believe, and many other prophets, where it actually says that there's going to be a temple in Jerusalem when the Messiah is here. Okay? Yes, there is. Okay? But this is not the third temple that the Jews want to build. The Jews have no right to build a temple. Why? Because they're still rejecting Messiah. So they are not eligible to rebuild the temple because they don't understand God's will. They have not understood God's will before. God told them before, I don't want a temple with cold stones. He wants a temple with living stones, breathing, living, organic kind of temple, which we are. Okay? So all this stuff about the third temple is false. It's very false, and people are misleading people and are misinterpreting what the Bible says. Not only the New Testament, Mark and Matthew, but also Daniel and Revelation. There is nothing in Revelation anyways. Okay, but there's another one, Paul. They're misinterpreting Paul's 2 Thessalonians 2. It's not what Paul is saying. Paul is not saying, hey, there's going to be a third temple. It's not what he's saying. So anyways, I will finish up for today because I want to keep this short or shorter. I don't want to go over 30 minutes. So anyways, give me your comments and subscribe. If you know anybody who would be interested in this topic, please let me know or let them know. Let them know and tell them about my channel so they can subscribe as well. I know I don't have very many subscriptions, and I know it's in God's hand. And so with that, I'm going to close. Let the Holy Spirit guide you always.